We're good on time.
Learn to unmute myself. For those of you coming online right now, we're going to give it just a few more seconds to see if other folks join us before we get started. Okay. Welcome. I'm so glad you're with us today for another Building Resilience webinar. My name is Valerie Young, and I serve as the Synod leader and stated clerk for the Synod of the Sun. Kathy Riley and her partner for Presbyterian Disaster Assistance had provided us with a handout. Now, if you didn't catch that at the bottom of the reminder email that came to your inbox about an hour ago, now is the time to go download that. Or just grab a pen and paper, but please don't stress out about the handout. You can always get that later. Today is April 30th, 2020. For me, that means 7 weeks of shelter in place with the love of my life. 4 weeks since I've hugged my grandson, and 0 weeks of confidence in what the world will look like tomorrow or 6 months from now. If you're like me, even though we know that God is in this with us, you might feel your resilience fading. My prayer for all of us today is that we might find new tools in this webinar, or even be reminded of those healthy tools we may have buried for a newfound love of Oreos. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your faithfulness to the kingdom of God and the church. Now, let's go to God in prayer for our time together today. Let's pray. Good, gracious, loving, and merciful God, in spite of and because of what is happening in the world today, you bring us together as your church. We are grateful for every day and every way we can gather, share, and learn from one another. Bless those from PDA who so generously offer their time and wisdom. May we be open to hearing your message of peace and love for us all. It's in Christ's name that we pray. Amen. Now, please welcome Kathy Riley and Mike Wills from Presbyterian Disaster Assistance.
Thank you, Valerie. It is so good to be with you. And Mike Wills is a volunteer with the National Response Team with PDA. I was originally a volunteer with PDA as well. I'm a Presbyterian pastor and joined the staff of PDA in emotional spiritual care in 2017, which you will remember was the season of Harvey, Maria, and Irma. So we increased some staff at that time, and I've been on staff since then. I just am so glad that you're here, so glad that you're taking this time for your own self-care and resilience. This webinar has been created especially in this time of the COVID-19 season for people like you. We want to just thank you before we start for your support of One Great Hour of Sharing, for your support of PDA. As you know, One Great Hour of Sharing makes our work possible in part, and also makes it possible for the Self-Development of Peoples and Presbyterian Hunger Program to do their amazing work. So thank you. So what we'll do today is Mike and I will tag team this presentation. It lasts about 50 minutes, and then we'll have time to respond to questions and answers, and perhaps your own good wisdom that you'll put in the question and answer section. So we'll take time at the end for that. So as we go, if you have questions, just go ahead and type them in there or hang on to them, and then we'll kind of take them when we finish the program. This is a 1-hour version of a 3-hour resilience program that we would typically offer in person. So we've created it now for this virtual format. So our goals for today are to talk about common signs of stress in mind and body, to offer ways to cope in the moment, and to build resilience into your lifestyle. We'll be giving you a chance to practice some new tools, we think, and as Valerie said, maybe remember some that you have already had, maybe you're using, maybe we're not. So we hope that at the end of our time together, you will feel rejuvenated, you'll feel a renewed sense of hope, and you'll have some good resources to take with you. So if you do have the handout, that's wonderful. And we'll be turning to it, and you'll be writing some responses down to our questions and prompts as we go. If you don't have the handout printed out, that's fine. Just have something to write with so you can jot down your own responses. And then, of course, you've got access to the handout that you can print out later, because we know that it can be very helpful to you in the days and weeks and months to come. So we will pause periodically. We'll give you a prompt and give you a little bit of time to write down your own thoughts. So if you finish writing before we come back to you and speak, just be patient. No pause is more than a minute, and we promise we'll always pick back up and continue on. So we look forward to being with you and learning together and talking together about building resilience. A key way that we understand resilience is that it is the ability to bounce back from difficult times, to stay flexible and functional even in the midst of stress. And I think we all know that we are all experiencing, as are the people around us, levels of stress and kinds of stress that we've not experienced before. Today we want to focus on 3 key elements of resilience that are essential in reducing the impact of stress on our lives. And those are using tools for self-care and self-regulation, telling our stories, and staying close to positive relationships. In knowing these elements and in using well-practiced tools, we can all sustain our calm effectiveness in times of stress and in times when our faith is strong, but the stress is strong, and we can work together to be resilient. We'll also touch today briefly on the importance of diet, sleep, and exercise as just core building blocks for a healthy, resilient lifestyle. And we'll also talk about the importance of our spiritual life. So I'm going to begin by teaching you a simple tool for relaxing. All the tools that Mike and I will offer today during our webinar are in the handout. So you don't have to worry about writing down instructions or details, because you'll have them at your disposal. So this is our most simple tool just to kind of kickstart the relaxation response in ourselves when stress might be building up. It's called Observe Your Breath, and that's really all it is. I'm going to give us just a bit of time to observe our breathing in and out, not trying to control it, not trying to change it, just noticing our breathing in and out, what that feels like, what the pace is, what it maybe sounds like. So I'm going to do just notice my breath myself with you, and then I'll call us back together in just a little bit. Okay. I hope you were able to just notice your breath. It might have slowed down as you were noticing, and it might not have changed at all. That's fine. I typically tend to also notice my heartbeat a little bit when I do this. So it's just a kind of a mindfulness, relaxing thing to do at any time during the day, and just notice your breath. And then there'll be some other ways we'll talk about to do some more regulating of your breathing. So now Mike is going to share some more ideas about stress and resilience. You're muted, Mike.
Thank you. So we know you're all busy and probably more busy than you usually are in this extra busy time. One of the tools that can help build our resilience is to take some time to think about what we find meaningful about our work. For many of us, we feel a strong commitment to the work we do, and it reflects what we value in our lives. Please turn to page 2 in your handout, or take that piece of paper you got out if you don't have the handout, and take a minute to write down an answer to this question. What do I find meaningful about the work I do? We'll take about 45 seconds to do this. Okay, now right below where you wrote down what's meaningful about your work, write these words. I do this work because. Then complete the sentence with your own words. I do this work because. Staying in touch with the value of our work on a daily basis can foster our resilience at all times, and especially in times like this, when people around us are very stressed and the demands on our time and resources are great. To help you stay aware of why you do your work, we have another tool for you called the hallway or doorknob affirmation. And here's how it works. Before picking up the phone or signing onto a teleconference or walking into whatever you're doing with your work right now, think to yourself, I do this work because, and use the one-liner you just created. This connection with our motivation reminds us of our sense of purpose and meaning, even when things are tough. A few years ago, I had a job where once or twice I would have to go speak to the board of directors. They were not a nice group of people. They were very distrustful and had a lot of hard questions to ask. Before I went into that room, as I was touched the doorknob, I would say to myself, I do this work because I'm doing a service to the people of this company, which made it easier for me to go in and to face this group of rather unpleasant people that I had to deal with. So what happens in our mind and body when we're stressed? In order to use resilience tools and practices to reduce the impact of stress on us, we need to have a good sense of what stresses us and how we tend to respond in mind and body. Again, please turn to page 3 in your handout, or take out that piece of paper, and write down a heading for stressors. Take a moment to jot down some of the things that stress you out. Are there particular people or situations or perhaps something unique to this coronavirus situation that especially stress you. So take a minute and write down the main experiences that tend to get to you. As I imagine you know, there are often physical reactions we experience when we're responding to stress. Take a moment and think about what happens within your body when you're experiencing stress. So I can tell when I'm getting stressed out because I get a knot at the base of my neck, at the beginning of my shoulder, that's so tight I've had masseurs that couldn't get it undone. You probably have some similar things. These physical responses can include increased blood pressure and heart rate. Our breathing rate may change. Some people hold their breath or breathe less frequently than normal. For others, breath becomes rapid and shallow. Stomach, muscle, back muscles, neck muscles may all tighten. We might experience tunnel vision. It's important to be aware of where stress lives in your body so you can use breathing and other tools to break into that stress response and begin to relax. In addition to the physical effects of stress that we can be aware of, there are changes in our brain when stress takes a front seat in our lives. We may experience what has been called the fight or flight response, where our bodies pump out hormones we need to survive in a life-threatening situation. In those times, and in times of less severe stress, part of our brain becomes more active and part of our brain becomes less active. The higher functioning part of the brain is the part that can become less active and probably less efficient. We may find it difficult to focus, to think logically, or to make plans and decisions. The ability to set goals and recognize the steps necessary to achieve them can be more challenging when we're under stress. It can be harder to use our words to express ourselves. And it turns out human beings just can't stay in a chronic state of stress for an extended period and stay healthy. Unless stress is addressed and dealt with, something's got to give. So that's why we're talking about ways to engage our higher functioning brain and our relaxed body as we go about our work and the rest of our daily life. Now, you've written down some of the things that are stressful in your life. I'd like you to turn your handout under the place where you wrote your stressors and jot down 2 or 3 of the ways that you respond to stress when you're most affected physically, emotionally, behaviorally, or relationally. And we'll take about 45 seconds to do this. And I hope you've all been able to come up with a couple of things that are ways you respond. One of the things I do is to begin to give short, sharp answers, which are fine for me because that's done in a second. For the people around me, not so good. and it's some long-lasting implications for me. So now we're going to switch to Kathy, who's going to lead us into the next section.
Thanks, Mike. So I know that in your area, you have experienced disasters, natural disasters, possibly human-caused disasters. And when those disasters or other major stressful events in our lives, such as COVID-19, which we understand to be a disaster, when those are major factors in our lives for an extended period of time, we can begin to feel overwhelmed. We can begin to feel hopeless, even though we have good support, we have church friends, we have family. It's challenging. So this webinar and our resilience work is all about developing habits that will help us function at our best level, even when work is demanding and stress is demanding our resources, and our volunteer lives perhaps have changed. So today we started out with a very simple tool for relaxation, observing, noticing our breath. We know that in resilience work and mental health and well-being, increasing the amount of oxygen that gets to our brain and regulating our breathing are very important tools that we can use to interrupt that stress response and then begin some relaxation. So we also know that everyone's different, and that's why we're offering kind of a buffet of resilience tools for you to be looking at in our time together, and then again when you look at the handout later. You'll find some tools that work for you, and we encourage you just to think about one or two new ones to try and to practice. No need to think you need to do all of them. You'll know which ones resonate and seem to make sense to you. So we're going to teach two more easy and quick tools now. And again, these are all in the handout that you'll be able to get if you don't have it in front of you. So the first tool, and I'm going to teach this one, is called the 4-7-8 breathing tool. It is my go-to relaxation tool. I use it all the time, and I tend to go to it without often even thinking about it when I find myself just getting a little revved up or a little tense. So I'm going to tell you how it works and then take you through it once at my pace, and I'm going to mute myself and give you a chance to take yourself through it at your own pace for 2 breath cycles. So here's how it works. You close your mouth and put your tongue towards the top of your mouth and breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, and then exhale for a count of 8, so that you're fully exhaling and exhaling through your mouth. And if you're doing this on your own, you can do it very audibly, kind of whoosh that breath out. The key is that ratio 4, 7, 8. So 4 to inhale, 7 to hold, 8 to exhale. And the most important thing is to exhale for a longer period of time than you inhaled, thereby fully emptying your breath. And that has some physiological responses that help us relax. So I'll take us through it once and then give you a chance to practice 2 breath cycles on your own. So if you're comfortable standing or sitting, however you are, if you're ready, we'll start that. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 1 breath cycle. That's my pacing. I invite you now to do 2 cycles of your own, 4, 7, 8, and then pause for just a second or 2, and I'll bring us back together. So give that a try. Okay. I can't see any of you, but I hope you've made it through 2 breath cycles. What I'd suggest is that you take yourself through 4 breath cycles when you practice this, and try practicing it twice a day if it seems like you might want to give it a try. And if you practice it every day, a couple times a day, you'll find yourself probably turning to it when you do feel a little stressed or a little tense. And I can tell you from personal experience, but also from a good body of research, that this tool has been shown to be really effective to help folks fall asleep if a lot of thoughts are whirling around in your mind, or go back to sleep if you wake up too early, which tends to be what happens to me. And I'll find myself thinking about the email I didn't send, or the meeting that's coming up. And if I do the 4-7-8 through 3 or 4 cycles, if I don't fall asleep right away, I am much calmer and able to turn my thoughts to sleep and rest. So I encourage you to take a look at this one and think about if it might work for you. And now Mike's going to lead us in the second tool of this section and into our next segment.
So the next tool is called progressive muscle relaxation. And the theory is that a lot of our stress energy resides in our muscles. And by contracting them strongly and releasing consciously, we can get rid of a lot of that energy. So the idea is that you'll tighten your muscles as much as you can, and then release them slowly, consciously letting go of the tension they hold. And we're going to work our way down the body. And I'm going to ask you to do this with me. And at least with the first one, which is the face, it's going to look a little funny, but it gets the point across of how much you need to stress. So I'm going to tell you a part of the body, and then you're going to contract those muscles as strongly as you can for a few seconds. Release when I tell you to release slowly, and then take a breath. We'll go on to the next group. We're going to work our way through the whole body. So begin with the face. Tighten as much as you can. Relax and breathe. Now your neck. Tighten as much as you can. Relax and breathe. Now your shoulders and your back. Tighten, tighten, relax, and breathe. Now your arms. Tighten, tighten, relax, and breathe. Now your hands and your fingers. Tighten, tighten, relax, and breathe. Your torso. Tighten, tighten, relax, and breathe. Your pelvic region. Tighten, tighten, relax, and breathe. Now your legs. Tighten, relax, and breathe. And then finally, your feet and your toes. Tighten, tighten, relax, and breathe. I hope you feel the release that comes with doing that. And the more you concentrate on it, I think the better that can become. Practice is essential for these tools to be useful in the midst of real life. We urge you to choose a couple of exercises and to make them your own, and to practice them regularly. You might decide to practice at a particular time of day. In the morning, after you brush your teeth. When you get home from work. Right before you go to bed is a great time to practice relaxation tools. You can create a practice reminder on your phone. The purpose of the practice is to make use of the tool so automatic, so natural, so familiar. When you get into a stressful situation, you don't have to think, oh, what should I do? But you'll have this repertoire of things you can get right into, which will help you to relieve that stress. We often assume that stressful situations and events automatically lead to stressful behavioral responses and other responses in our body. But we're offering you a different way to consider the work you do and the environment in which you do it, especially when stress levels are high for you and those around you. The stressors do not have to lead to the effects they commonly have on us. We have options. When you let go of the belief that stressors automatically lead to negative effects that makes room for something new. When we're aware of that which stresses us and how we tend to respond, we can more quickly take steps to relax and see our behavior not as something we're stuck with, but simply as a response to the context in which we work and live. And in many instances, we can choose how we respond. In between the stressful situations and the response to those stressful situations, there's a space. We can stand in that space between the stressors and our responses. We realize it's there, we can take and use our wisdom, our knowledge about stress responses, some of which we identified earlier, and our resilience tools to help us control our responses so that the effects are not as negative as they might otherwise be. Now, Kathy is going to lead you into another section on taking care of ourselves.
Thanks. You can't see me, but I'm smiling as Mike is sharing these things because it's just such wonderful, wonderful sharing, and I hope it's good for you as well. So as I mentioned in the beginning, research tells us, and our experience in resilience and trauma recovery tells us that self-care, storytelling, and relationships, positive relationships, are essential elements for reducing the impact of a stressful environment on us and for building and maintaining resilience. So whether you're still working, whether you're retired, I know that you're involved in church work and service. And so our ability to continue to do that work in the midst of this season can be enhanced when we do some of these in the moment tools that we've been teaching, but also in lifestyle tools, things that we enjoy, probably know how to do, probably have done, but can neglect or find more difficult to do during stressful times. So self-care is where we'll start with this particular section. It can start with the breathing and the muscle relaxation exercises that we've experienced. And for self-care, all the suggestions you have surely been hearing about lately, reading in your email about taking care of ourselves. So taking time off every day for rest, maintaining our hobbies, or in this season of COVID restrictions, developing some new ones are important. Making sure that meals are just time for meals and not for watching the news or catching up on emails. And especially limiting the amount of time we spend on reading the news and being intentional about when we check the news about coronavirus. All of those are important components of self-care to build and maintain our resilience. One of the other areas that we know is important that most of us have heard about since childhood and probably have taught others is the importance of diet. So eating a healthy way, sleeping a good night's sleep, and exercising. All of those are important. But now we know this isn't just good advice from our childhood or good advice we've been passing on. There's strong scientific evidence that those elements, diet, sleep, and exercise, are absolutely crucial, not only for healthy bodies, but also for healthy brains and for good mental health. And if you already know about this research, you've been following some of it, I can tell you that we're well aware that knowing and doing can sometimes be two different things. So I want to offer a few thoughts in this area and then a suggestion. So let's start with diet. In times of hard work and extra stress, as many of us are under now, it's especially important, of course, to follow whatever dietary recommendations your healthcare professionals have recommended you to do to the best of our ability. But if you're not already following a diet for health reasons, I would suggest that you take a look at the Mediterranean diet, the Mediterranean approach to eating. There are some very strong bodies of evidence that this can be healthy, again, for our brain, for our heart, and for our mental health. So look at the Mediterranean diet, look at the kinds of foods that they recommend we eat and the kinds they recommend we stay away from, and see if that might make sense for you. It's just still true that getting between 6 and 8 hours of sleep a night is linked to better mood, better overall feelings of well-being, and can reduce the impact of stress in our lives. I think instinctively we know this. So what we also know is that having a very regular pattern of going to sleep and getting up, even when we don't have to, is an important way to increase our ability to sleep and to increase the amount of time our body and brain spend in recovery mode. So if we can stick to a regular schedule of rest and sleep, our body can kind of say, and our mind can say, all right, this nighttime, whatever that is for you, for me, it's about 11:30. It's time to rest. It's time to shut down. It's time to relax. It's time to sleep. So if you can, keeping that regular schedule of rest and sleep is really important for resilience and well-being. And then there's exercise. I think you probably know that exercise stimulates the body's natural feel-good hormones, which can make problems seem more manageable and, again, increase our resilience. So the bottom line is that exercising within physical limits, if we have them, moving 20 to 30 minutes a day, as many days a week as we can, is important and helpful. Even when that movement or exercise comes in at 5-minute spurts during the day, if it adds up to 20, 25 a day, that is going to be important for our overall well-being. There are lots of ways to incorporate that kind of movement and exercise into our lives, even in COVID restrictions. And if you're a user of apps or you like to look at email articles, there are so many out there to help us remember to move more often. I have a Fitbit that reminds me, but I find myself ignoring that sometimes. So I've got a yellow sticker on my computer that just says move, and it reminds me to get up and move. So I'm going to invite you now to take your handout or your piece of paper and just write down 1 or 2 things that you think you could do to eat in a healthier way, to get a good night's sleep, and or to move a little more every day. So I'll give you a little bit of time just to jot down a few notes that you might think you'd like to try. And I'll give you that time now. So I want to just talk for a moment about some aspects of self-care that apply specifically in these times of COVID-19 restrictions, when so many, if not all of us, are staying at home. If we're working at home. If we have regular volunteer work, might be staying in touch with church members and phone trees and emails. All of that's happening at home in the same place. And you've probably already figured out that it helps to develop ways to separate those activities, structured work or volunteer activities, from other times of our life, so that we ourselves and perhaps those we live with know the difference between when we're focused and functioning and working on something and when we're off. Some folks find it helpful to kind of dress for work when you know you've got a Zoom meeting or a teleconference, or you've got to respond to emails or other work. To have clothes, to perhaps have a space in your home where that happens, to signal to yourself and others, this is work time, this is volunteer time, this is focus time, and then there's leisure and other time. It helps to find that separation as best we can so that we can be fully present to the goodness of the rest of life and relationships when we're not doing that focused paid work or volunteer work, so that we can enjoy other aspects. Some folks find it helpful to establish office hours or times when it's best to contact us so that others know. And then, unless there's an emergency, we know that the rest of our day is going to be a time when we're going to be able to relax. So lots of ways to be thinking about this and to be creative as it continues with the restrictions that we have, to just create a home environment that can be structured, but also give us time for flexibility and for relaxation. And now Mike is going to share some additional important ways that we can care for ourselves.
When we're in the midst of troubles, it's easy to get overwhelmed. And we need to find ways to very simply and briefly pull ourselves up out of the sea of difficulties we find ourselves in the middle of. So think about the little things you do that work for you, the little things that bring you joy, the things that might bring a smile to your face and make you feel good, that are not hard to do, that are simple and quick, that can bring a smile to your face. Take a moment and think about that. So whatever these things are, please make a commitment to do them as often as you can. And again, we're talking about little simple things you can access easily. There's people that take joy out of looking at funny cat videos, looking at pictures you have of your family or friends or favorite places, especially in this time of nonstop access to social and news media about COVID-19. We need to take a break for things that are uplifting. It's incredibly important not to start and end your day with news or work, but to start and end with something that brings you pleasure and lifts your spirits. We're going to talk about this more later, but I find at the end of the day, if I take a few moments and, like the old song said, count my blessings, think of the things that I'm grateful for, it puts me in a much more restful state. So please take your handout on page 5 or your piece of paper and write down 2 or 3 simple things you can do at any time during the day or evening that'll lift your spirits. And hopefully you thought of a couple. Sometimes in the middle of difficult situations, we find ourselves kind of mentally and emotionally drifting away. Being clear about our intention for resilience and having well-practiced tools available to us can make a big difference in how we deal with stressful situations. In addition to the exercises we've done so far, we can use what are called grounding tools to break that stress cycle where we're pulled out of the present moment to bring us back, to make us more relaxed in body and mind. And these are very simple and easy to do, and they're especially helpful when you're in a meeting and you're drifting off and losing your focus, or when you're spacing out from anxiety. Anytime you're finding it difficult to concentrate, you can usually use them without anybody noticing. They help restore your ability to pay attention and perhaps bring some inner quieting. So there's really 2 versions of the same thing, which are using your sense of touch to pull you back to the present moment. And the first is grounding with your hands. So what you need to do is pick something, really almost anything will do, an object you can touch or rub. It can be paper clips, it can be coins in your pocket, or a piece of jewelry. If I'm wearing a jacket, I find grabbing the jacket can help, or your chair. When I have one, I find using a pen is very helpful. And what you do is just let your focus be completely on the touching of that object. Let your fingers quickly and quietly explore it. Notice the shape, the size, the texture, the temperature, whether it's sharp or blunt, really any tactile sense. And as you do that, it can pull you back into the present moment. Another variation when your hands are not free is grounding with your feet. You can use your feet to tap the floor or feel the soles of your feet against the bottom of your shoes, firmly planted on the floor. or run your foot along the leg of the chair. Really almost anything to physically take your concentration and pull you back into the moment. These exercises we've been doing can be called self-care in the moment. The moment we begin to notice our personal stress responses popping up, we have the opportunity to step into that space we talked about and plan our response. If we've been practicing tools, we can use one in the moment to interrupt our stress reaction and make other choices. And now Kathy is going to talk to you about some other ideas you can do to support your resilience.
Thanks. And I was thinking as Mike was sharing the grounding exercise that a lot of us who either preach or give a minute for mission or have to say something in church, unconsciously, I think, ground ourselves by holding on to the lectern or the pulpit, feeling the texture. So if that ever comes up for you when we're back in churches again, or you're giving a presentation, you can ground yourself, as Mike said, without anyone even knowing it. So a good tool to use. And I want to mention here, as I try to remember, that in PDA, when we teach these resilience workshops, and in face-to-face, they're between 3 and 6 hours, we only teach tools that we use. So you'll know that what Mike and I are teaching are ones that we have found helpful. So I want to move into the section on relationships. As I mentioned earlier, another key pillar, both relationships and telling our story. What we know is that for good mental health overall and resilience during times of stress, and you know this, it's helpful to have one or more persons in our lives who will listen when we need to talk. And we also want to make sure that we make time for the positive, life-giving relationships in our life. If we have these elements in our life and continue to use the tools that we're talking about, we can continue to do good service to others that is fulfilling and reduce the impact of stress on our daily functioning. I am pretty sure, without having met any of you, that you listen to others when they need to talk. And so you know the value of telling their story for the people you listen to in your service to others in your personal life. And so might it be possible that telling your story to others could be equally beneficial for you? Take a minute and just think about what those benefits are of telling our story to someone else. I want to name some of the things that we believe and understand and know telling our story can offer. In telling our story, whether it's a good experience or challenging and stressful experiences, we make meaning of those life experiences. We can become more aware of how the experiences affected us and how, if necessary, we can release some of those feelings and memories of the more difficult, challenging, distressing experiences that we've had. When we tell our stories and are truly heard by another, we form deep and meaningful connections with the people who are listening to us. Telling our story lessens the impact of difficult or stressful situations and experiences and reminds us that we are not in this alone. There are others there to share our journey. And I want to say that it's not just negative or stressful experiences, but sharing positive experiences gives us a chance to claim and to celebrate those experiences with someone else who's really listening. We know that remembering and telling the important stories of our lives are powerful tools that can be learned and practiced. If you are one who's more typically going to be the listener, it may be more of a challenge, but it's worth it to find ways to share our story with others. It'll help us function better in times of stress like this and throughout our lives. So I want to share with you some thoughts about telling our story. And I want to begin just by asking you to think about who you have in your life that you talk with on a regular basis about the important aspects of your life, including perhaps the stress that we're all experiencing in this coronavirus situation. So just think for a minute, who do you talk to just on a regular basis? Okay, I hope you thought of a few folks. I can kind of go through a list in my head of the folks that I talk to regularly. What I'd like to suggest now is that it's a good idea to find one or two people, in addition to the folks you normally talk with, to be what we call an intentional listening partner. This is probably going to be someone other than your spouse or a child or someone you live with. You may find that having an intentional listening partner is going to be helpful when you just need to talk out your reactions, perhaps to the difficult stories you're hearing from others as you care for them. You may need just to realize there's some things you want to work on to build your own resilience, and it would be helpful to buddy up with someone who will share your progress and your challenges. And I think we all just need someone to talk to when stress has gotten the better of us. So an intentional listening partner is someone who will not judge us. It's someone who will keep confidential everything we say. So someone that we trust. Someone who can be available within a day or so of when we ask for a conversation. It's someone who won't give us advice unless we ask for it. And it's someone who won't talk about their own stuff when we've asked for time to talk about what's on our mind. So it's someone to think about carefully, and you can let your intentional listening partner know, hey, I heard about this intentional listening partner idea. Here's how it works, and would you be that for me? I might want to call you on a Wednesday and say, hey, I've got something on my mind. Can we talk tonight or tomorrow or soon? And can we talk for 20 minutes or so? So you kind of set some parameters and some guidelines for it. You can do the same for that person, be their listening partner, but you don't have to. So it's really an invitation that you can offer, but it's not necessary. So what I'd like to do now is invite you to take out your handout or your piece of paper and just write down the name of one or two people that you think could be an intentional listening partner for you. And if you already have someone like this, jot their name down, and I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. So who could be an intentional listening partner for you? All right, I hope you were able to think of a name or two, and if not, of course, you can always come back to that. One of my intentional listening partners is someone that I've known for a long time, and he knows me well. He's very honest, and he's very funny. So talking to him just lifts my spirits. But I can talk to him and say, man, I had this situation, and it didn't go well. I didn't handle it the way I would have liked. It went south in a heartbeat, and it's kind of a mess. And he will often say, wow, Kathy, that doesn't sound like one of your shining moments. Tell me what you're thinking. What do you want to talk about? And we go from there. So I encourage you to think about finding that in your life. One of the things that we know to be true is that when we share our stories of difficult experiences, this is true for trauma work, and it's true for just ordinary run-of-the-mill tough times. When we're going to share that story, it's helpful, very helpful, if we do it in a relaxed body and mind. So before you have a conversation, maybe with a spouse or a friend or with an intentional listening partner about something that's been very difficult for you, take a moment before you do that conversation and use a relaxation technique. Use something that works for you, breathing, grounding, progressive muscle relaxation, one of the others that we're sharing, and just enter into a more relaxed state before you have that conversation. And you can do the same when you know you're about to hear of a difficult story from someone else. You can take a moment to put yourself into a more relaxed body as well before you hear that story. In addition to finding intentional listening partners, it's just, I think, always a helpful reminder to us to make time for the positive, life-giving relationships in our lives that I mentioned earlier. People that lift our spirits, people we feel good about being with, people that help us laugh. You may want to take time later to just review those relationships, remind yourself of who they are, and if it's helpful to remind yourself to really schedule some time for them, be sure to do that. That can be really helpful, especially when we're physically separated from folks. Being intentional about it will help our resilience and help our well-being. And now Mike's going to share some thoughts and some tools related to our spiritual lives.
So we've been talking today about stress and its effects on our work and our relationships, and our focus has been on finding and strengthening ways to reduce these effects and function well in the midst of stress. Of course, most of the people you serve are also living lives that have been changed and affected by the stress of this disaster, this COVID-19. We're all working towards increasing resilience. We know that for many people, a very good resource is an active spiritual life. Now, for many of us, that includes practices from our faith tradition. For others, activities that are an important part of their inner life can include time with nature, meditation, and other similar practices. Spiritual practices can be a source of hope and guidance, and typically involve a feeling of connectedness with something beyond ourselves, a sense of belonging and meaning, and hopefully an experience of awe and wonder. We also know that during stressful times, those who serve others may feel too busy or preoccupied to engage in their usual spiritual practices. But this area in our lives is so important to keep up with. We have to do whatever we need to do to continue to focus on it, whatever that looks like for you. There are a number of spirituality practices in the handout, and we hope you'll take a look at them and see if you might want to add something or maybe continue to do something you used to do in the past but don't do any longer. But one of the things I mentioned before was gratitude. We're going to focus today on one thing, and that's cultivating an active practice of gratitude. A growing body of research has revealed that gratitude enhances all of our lives: physical and psychological health, increased happiness, and life satisfaction. Grateful people are less likely to suffer burnout. And some studies have reported that keeping a gratitude journal can increase overall happiness. So I invite you to take a moment and allow what you are grateful for to come into your mind, and to write that on page 5 of your handout, or again, your paper, at least 3 things that you're grateful for. It could be people, could be your pets, could be organizations or special meals or special and beautiful places. We'll give you a minute to list those things you're feeling grateful for. We've talked about the value of starting your end or ending your day with something that will lift your spirits. And remembering your own gratitude list and adding to it can be a great way to do this. Kathy is going to share some other tools for the end of the day.
So as we near the end of our formal presentation, I just want to talk about a particular time of day that we can be especially aware of in order to foster our resilience. When we're preparing to end our workday or our day of focused activity, whatever that is, we can be conscious of setting work aside so we can be, again, fully present for that goodness and other aspects of our life. There are a couple tools in the handout that we can use kind of at the end of a day to just let go of maybe some of the stress that has accumulated or clung to us. I'm only going to mention one right now. It's very simple. It can be done at the end of the day or really anytime you just need to let go of some stress. And it's called the vigorous exhale. Again, very simple. It's just inhaling a deep breath, kind of pursing your lips, and then exhaling as powerfully as you can. So the idea of being just sort of whooshing out all the stress that maybe has come in the day and just whooshing it all out and letting it go. So I'm going to do that with you 3 times. I'm going to mute myself and I invite you all to just inhale deeply and then exhale and whoosh it back out. So we'll do that. I find that one just very helpful and I do it a lot. And sometimes my husband will say, are you sighing for some reason? And I'm just vigorous exhaling. So Mike is going to offer a few words before I bring our formal program to a close, and then we'll turn to some questions and answers.
So we packed a lot into this last hour. If you have the handout, please take it out or get the paper you've been using. Take a moment to review what we've done in this time together and write down one insight or idea you want to be sure you take with you for the coming days and weeks. Write it down on the front cover of the handout or the top of the paper that you've been using. So take a few minutes and do that. After the webinar is over, take a look at the other exercises in the handout to begin on page 8, and choose 1 or 2 to write on the front page you might spend some time with in order to make them your own. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy, who's going to bring the program to a close.
So we are at the end of the formal presentation, and we'll take a look and see what pops up in the question and answer period. I want to thank you again for taking this time to learn about and to find ways to build your own resilience. And we want to encourage you yourselves to use these tools and techniques, and please feel free to share them with others. Share the handout, share the ideas. We'd love to have this just kind of spread out among others as you have been able to take advantage of them. I will certainly be available for questions through my email. If you have questions later, we can always come back to those. And so I want to just take a look now and see what, if anything, is in the question and answer section. I don't see anything there. But if there are any, if you have questions, that should be a place where you can write a question. And we're going to give you just a second to do that. I think the chat function is not been enabled. So if you do want to say something or have a question, put it in the Q&A box, which you should have at the bottom of your screen. And while we give that just a minute to see if something comes up, I will just share that it's a blessing to be able to be with you in this way. This is new for PDA, to do webinars and to be able to be with you in a virtual way. we're just so glad that you're here. And again, I don't know you all, but I know that you are important to your congregations and your faith groups. And I want to thank you for the service that you are offering in whatever ways you're doing that. We here at PDA are also church members and pastors and know how important the work is you're doing to stay connected and to stay faithful in these challenging times. So I do see a question in the question box, and it says, how might I be able to help others be aware of their stressors? And that is a great question. And I'm going to speak just for a bit and see if Mike wants to add anything. So that's interesting and challenging and yet important. And what comes to my mind first is I might share with whoever I'm concerned about or want to have a conversation with this experience and say, you know, I was part of a webinar and we spent some time writing down our stressors and you know, talked about how important it is to know what stresses us so that we can step in and intervene with ourselves. And I wonder, you know, have you ever thought about that? Have you thought about the things that stress you? Have you noticed what tends to stress you? What kind of gets you going? And kind of see how that goes conversationally. And depending on who it is, it can be taken a little further. And if they trust you and it's a good relationship, you can say, you know, I've noticed that this tends to just kind of get to you. Have you noticed that? What do you think? Maybe start it that way, but start with kind of owning it ourselves and then seeing if that's an entree to a further conversation to help them realize it. And then I'm thinking another easy way would be, if you can, email them or hand them a copy of the handout, because of course the handout itself says stressors and has the prompts, and they might be able to work on it on their own just by having a handout. So I want to see if Mike wants to add anything before we look at anything else.
No, Kathy, I think you captured it. I think you model it a bit and throw the ball back to them and help them ask their own questions. And I think that you get them thinking about it and engage in a dialogue with them. I think it'll help them to start the process at least.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah. All right. So we've had that question. I'm not seeing any others. I want to let people just take a second to, if they want to add anything else. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. And if something comes up later, you obviously know how to get in touch with Valerie. She's got my email if it turns out to be something you'd like to check in with me about. And I'll close just by reminding you of what I think you already know, which is that the resources that the PCUSA has for this time of COVID are phenomenal. If you've not looked recently at the PCUSA website, at the very top, you'll see the banner for COVID-19 resources, the resources for pastors, for elders, deacons, congregation members, so many resources there. And the last couple of weeks, they've started making the new things red. So if you've already been there, you can just go and catch your eye with the red stuff and see what's new. The other resource that we have, of course, PDA has a website, and we've got pages for COVID-19. We've got a page for spiritual and emotional care resources, so you can look at our PDA website. The other place that I'll strongly encourage you to go if you think this could be helpful is the mental health ministries page of PCUSA. Donna Miller is our mental health associate, and she has done just an amazing job of finding and curating and listing mental health resources for pastors, for individuals, for parents of children. There's information there about suicide prevention and lots of hotlines. So that's an incredible resource. So those of you who are in turn resourcing others can look at the mental health page and our own pages and just find great resources. So it's such a pleasure and such a blessing to be part of a connectional church where we're all working together. And we're glad to have been with you in this time. I want to give Mike a chance to say a word, and then I'll close us out.
I can only echo what Kathy said and ask blessings upon all of you always.
Thank you. I think Valerie's still with us, and I don't know if there's anything else you want to say before I'll close us with prayer.
Thank you so much, both Kathy and Mike, for being with us. If there's any way that I can be of assistance or the Synod can be of assistance to you in your ministries, please feel free to reach out. Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks, Valerie. It's been such a pleasure. So let me just give a brief word of closing prayer. Gracious and loving God, we are just so grateful to be together in this way and to have the technology that makes it possible in this challenging, difficult, devastating time for so many, to know that we are connected to each other through you, through the Holy Spirit, through your Son is a gift and a blessing, and we are so grateful. Be with us, help us feel your presence, and help us be your presence to others in the days and weeks that come. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you.